Hey everyone. Today we're going to start something different. This isn't just a lesson. This is your story. And it starts right now, with a question that might be quietly burning in your mind. Is this really the life I was meant to live? Because one morning, you wake up and it just doesn't feel right. You're not in pain, nothing dramatic has happened. But that quiet emptiness? That subtle ache in your chest as you scroll through your phone, look out the window, or drive to work. It's starting to grow louder, and you can't unhear it anymore. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you really, really like what I do here. It began the same way most turning points do. Quietly. It wasn't a car crash or a breakup, no screaming revelation, just silence. You were sitting in the break room, half listening to someone talk about weekend plans. You smiled, nodded. But inside? Empty. Not numb. Just aware. Aware that your life had quietly slipped onto autopilot. The job you once fought for now felt like a cage. Your passions were faint echoes. Your days blended into each other like fog on a mirror. Wake up, work, eat, scroll, sleep, repeat. But that day something shifted. It was a single sentence. Maybe from a podcast. Maybe from a stranger at the bus stop. You don't even remember who said it. Just the words. If nothing changes, nothing changes. Simple. Brutal. True. You went home that night, lay on your back, stared at the ceiling, and wondered, what if this is it? What if I die with a head full of dreams I never had the guts to follow? That's when the quiet panic hit. Not the kind that sends you into a frenzy, but the kind that settles into your bones. The realization that time doesn't ask for permission. It just keeps moving. And you've been waiting for something. For clarity. Permission. A sign. But the truth slapped you in the face. No one is coming to shape your future for you. That's your job. It didn't happen all at once, but that night, you opened your notes app and typed one line. This can't be all there is. That was it. The spark. The seed of rebellion against a life that felt like a compromise. It didn't feel like motivation. It felt like grief. Like mourning the version of you that could have been. You started noticing things. The way your coworkers complained like it was a hobby. The way people lit up when they talked about side projects, books, ideas. The light you'd once had. The way you used to dream. You remembered your younger self, full of fire and certainty. You didn't have money. You didn't have connections. But you had something bigger. Possibility. Now, you had stability. But it came at a cost. Your future was a repeat of your past. That realization hit like a punch to the gut. So you did something strange. You stayed up all night and wrote a letter to yourself. Not the current you, but the future you. The one who made it, who figured it out, the one who didn't settle. And you asked them, how did you get out of this? What did you stop doing? What did you finally start? You didn't have the answers yet, but you wrote them anyway, made them up. Described a life so far from yours it felt like fiction. A life full of purpose, creation, energy, clarity. A life you could be proud of. And you realized, you didn't want to escape your current life. You wanted to build a new one. That's when the journey began. Not a physical one, but a mental uprising. You stopped waiting to be motivated. You started watching people who had done it. People who broke patterns and rewrote their scripts. They weren't smarter, not luckier, just more aware. They didn't shape their future by accident. They decided. It wasn't about big wins. It was about ownership. You looked at your life like a builder looks at raw land. No more excuses, just possibility. Some parts had to be torn down. Some needed a foundation, and others, a few habits, a few beliefs, just needed to be removed completely. But here's the scariest part. You realized you'd have to let go of the current you to become the future you. And that meant discomfort. It meant saying no to people who kept you small. It meant showing up to workouts, to journaling, to business plans, long before you felt ready. It meant facing who you really were and deciding to do better anyway. That was the wake-up call. Not just the moment you knew things had to change, but the moment you stopped blaming the past. The future wasn't something far away anymore. It was right here, in the next hour, in the next yes, in the next small risk you took. You weren't just drifting anymore. You were designing. And that first blueprint? It started with one belief. My future is mine to shape, and no one's coming to do it for me. The next morning, you set the alarm 1 hour earlier. You didn't hit snooze. You didn't scroll. You just sat up, poured a cup of coffee, opened your laptop, and started learning, planning, writing, moving. It was messy, confusing. Half the time you doubted yourself. But for the first time in a long time, you weren't sleepwalking through your life, you were awake, and it felt electric. You didn't get far before hitting your first wall. Not a dramatic collapse. More like standing at the edge of a fog-covered road and realizing you had no idea where you were going. Sure, you were finally awake. You had energy, maybe even hunger. But for what? The answer came, slowly, through a question that wouldn't leave you alone. If I could live any life, what would it actually look like? Not a vague idea. Not more money, or more freedom, or happiness. You'd heard those words before, tossed around like motivational candy. But they were empty, without detail. You needed something real. A vision. So you sat down again. Same quiet apartment, same flickering desk lamp, same half-cold coffee, and forced yourself to go deeper. No distractions, no filters, just you and a blank screen. At first, it felt silly, childish even. You typed things like, live in a place that inspires me. Work on things that matter. Feel proud of who I am. But the more you wrote, the more real it became. What does the future you wear every day? How do you spend your mornings? Who are you texting? What problems are you solving? What do people say about you when you're not in the room? The picture started forming, vague at first, then sharper, like a painting coming into focus with every brushstroke. You could feel that future self pulling you forward, and it became clear. Vision isn't just seeing where you want to go, it's feeling it, tasting it, rehearsing it until your brain starts believing it's already real. Because the truth is this, your mind doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. What you visualize, you start to build. What you rehearse in your mind, you begin to expect. And what you expect, you take action toward, even if you don't realize it. That's when you discovered something life-altering. Every single person who shaped an extraordinary future, whether it was building a business, changing the world, transforming their health, or leaving a legacy, they all had one thing in common. They knew exactly what they wanted. They were specific. Not just, I want to write a book. No. I want to write a memoir about growing up invisible in a small town and have it published by HarperCollins by the time I'm 35. Not just, I want to be rich. No. I want to build a consulting business that allows me to work remotely, earn $200K a year, and take 1 month off every summer to travel with my kids. See the difference? Clarity creates direction. Direction creates momentum. And momentum is the oxygen of your future. You began to map it out. Your personal future blueprint. It wasn't perfect. It evolved constantly. But it gave you something to aim for. You wrote down 5 key areas of your life: career and purpose, health and energy, relationships and connection, wealth and freedom, identity and growth. And under each one, you described your future state. What life would look like 3 to 5 years from now if you were living it fully, courageously, and intentionally. You didn't write what was realistic. You wrote what was true. And something clicked. You no longer saw your vision as a dream. You saw it as a destination. You started noticing things. Your energy shifted. Suddenly, you weren't just reacting to life. You were filtering it. You started asking, does this help me get closer to my vision or pull me away from it? Your phone habits changed. Your friends noticed a difference. You stopped saying yes to things that felt small. You started chasing the aligned yes, the kind of opportunity or decision that made your stomach leap a little because it was pointing in the same direction as your future. You realized that shaping your future doesn't require endless hustle. It requires alignment. Alignment between who you are today and who you want to become, between what you value and how you spend your time, between what you want and what you tolerate. The clearer your vision became, the the more intolerant you became of distractions, detours, and delay. And it wasn't always exciting. Sometimes it meant staring at your bank account and realizing it didn't match your vision. Sometimes it meant skipping parties to study a skill. Sometimes it meant walking away from people you loved because they couldn't see where you were headed. But every time you chose your future over your comfort, you gained power. Because here's the secret no one talks about. The universe doesn't move for the person who kind of wants something. It moves for the one who burns with clarity. Clarity isn't a one-time act. It's a daily practice. You started your mornings differently. No more checking emails or scrolling. Now, you reviewed your blueprint. You looked at your future self like a GPS, guiding you, reminding you, daring you to act in alignment with who you said you wanted to become. And when the voice of doubt whispered, "Who do you think you are?" you had an answer. I'm the author of this story, and I know where this is going. You still got tired. You still got distracted. You still made mistakes. But now, you weren't drifting. You were driving. And that's the difference between someone who watches their future happen and someone who shapes it. Intention. Not intensity. Not perfection. Just clarity. Repeated daily. You're not building a fantasy. You're building a life. And it starts with seeing it so vividly that your current self begins to make way for your future self. One choice, one belief, one powerful moment at a time. Because your future isn't found, it's built. And now, you finally had a blueprint to build it with. You knew what you wanted now. You had the vision. A clear one. One that made your heart beat faster when you reread it. But then came the wall you didn't see coming. The one that doesn't look like a wall at all. It looks like you. Not the future you. Not the driven, focused, next-level version you journaled about. No. It's the current you. The one with the habits, doubts, and identity that created the life you were trying to outgrow. And that's when the real war began. Not out there. In here. Because to shape your future, you have to become the person who belongs in it. And right now, you didn't believe you were that person yet. This was the hardest part so far. Not waking up early, not building habits, not even saying no to comfort. It was facing the quiet lies you'd been telling yourself for years. I'm not that kind of person. I always give up eventually. I'm just not built for that life. These weren't facts. They were scripts, written in childhood, shaped by failure, reinforced by repetition. You weren't lazy. You were conditioned. You weren't broken. You were programmed. And no one ever told you that the most powerful act of shaping your future was rewriting the identity underneath your choices, because you can't outperform who you believe you are. So you made a decision. To shape your future, you had to stop chasing outcomes, and start becoming the kind of person who creates those outcomes by default. That meant going deeper. You started asking better questions, not, how do I get more motivated? But, who do I need to become to live that life? What would the future me do today? What do I need to let go of? For good. Because transformation isn't about doing more. It's about being more. And being more often requires subtracting, not adding. You had to let go of the identity that needed to be liked by everyone. The identity that avoided failure at all costs. The identity that stayed small so no one would expect too much. Those weren't just habits. They were protection, armor, survival. But now, you were building. And builders don't wear fear as clothing. You didn't need a new version of your past. You needed a new self-image. So, you built a tool, the Identity Shift Framework. Step 1. Name the future you give them a name. A story, a presence, make them real. Step 2. List how they think, act, and decide. What are their standards? What do they tolerate? What do they ignore? Step 3. Begin acting in alignment. Imperfectly, but consistently. Not fake it. Practice it. Like an actor preparing for the most important role of their life. Because the truth is, the future you already exists. They're just waiting for you to catch up. And every time you acted like them, even when it felt awkward, You made it more real. You realized identity is earned through action. Let's be honest, there were days it felt like lying. Walking into a room with confidence you didn't fully believe in. Saying no to things you used to crave. Sitting down to write, create, or sell when you still doubted your worth. But here's the truth that saved you. You don't believe your way into a new identity. You behave your way there. So you kept showing up, not as the old you hoping to change, but as the future you rehearsing the role until it stopped being a role. Little things started to change. The way you introduced yourself, the way you reacted to conflict, the way you handled stress, setbacks, compliments, rejection. You stopped explaining your old self. You stopped apologizing for your ambition. You stopped underplaying your goals just to make people comfortable. You were done trying to earn approval from a world you were no longer trying to fit into. Because you finally understood. You can't build the future while staying loyal to the past.
And here's the beautiful twist. The people around you, they started to respond differently. Not because you told them you changed, but because they felt it. Your energy shifted. Your language shifted. You weren't just doing more. You were being someone else. And people respond not to effort, but to identity. You weren't begging for validation anymore. You were becoming someone people wanted to follow. Not because you were loud or flashy, but because you were aligned, and alignment is magnetic.
This phase didn't come with fireworks. It came with quiet rewrites of your personal code. You replaced "I hope" with "I'm building." You replaced "I'm trying" with "I'm becoming." You replaced "one day" with "today." And it worked. Because the real transformation? It wasn't your career, your income, or your routines. It was when you stopped asking, "Will this work for me?" and started asking, "Who am I becoming by doing this?" The moment your actions became a reflection of your new identity, not just a strategy to get a result, you stopped chasing change and started embodying it. The future wasn't something you were waiting for anymore. It was someone you were becoming. And for the first time, you weren't just inspired by your vision. You were becoming worthy of it. No one told you that once the identity starts shifting, the next battle wouldn't be clarity, or even belief. It would be discipline. Not the harsh military kind. Not the performative, grind at all costs narrative you see online. But real discipline, the quiet kind. The invisible force that builds your future brick by brick when no one is clapping, no one is watching, and motivation is nowhere in sight. And it hit you. The version of me that has the life I want didn't just get lucky. They're disciplined. But what is discipline, really? It's doing what aligns with your future self, even when your current self doesn't feel like it.
Let's not sugarcoat it. This part was hard. The novelty of your transformation started to wear off. The vision was still there, but the adrenaline was fading. What remained were choices. Wake up or snooze. Open the book or open Netflix. Journal your plan or scroll your feed. Keep your word or make your excuse. Every choice, no matter how small, became a vote for the identity you were building, or the one you were trying to outgrow. And most days, no one knew whether you got it right, except you. That's the weight of discipline. You realized something powerful. Discipline wasn't about being perfect every day. It was about being consistent enough that your default behavior became a future-aligned habit. So, you made a shift in your mindset. From, "I need to feel ready," to, "I act because it's who I am now." You stopped outsourcing your future to your feelings. Instead, you started building what you called the discipline blueprint. It had 3 pillars. 1. Environment design. You stopped trying to win battles in rooms designed for distraction, so you redesigned your space. You removed friction for the good habits. Journal already open. Gym clothes by the bed. Book on the desk. You increased friction for the bad ones. Deleted apps, blocked sites, unplugged the TV. You understood. Willpower is overrated. Environment is strategy. Winners don't have more willpower. They just build fewer temptations into their lives. 2. Minimum viable commitment. You dropped the all-or-nothing mindset. You used to think, if I can't do an hour at the gym, I won't go at all. Now, 10 push-ups is better than 0. 1 paragraph is better than no writing. You learned to lower the bar without lowering the standard. Why? Because consistency builds identity, and identity sustains discipline. You made success ridiculously achievable at first. Not because you lacked ambition,
but because you understood that discipline isn't about heroic effort. It's about building trust with yourself. 3. Scorekeeping the right things. You stopped tracking outcomes. Instead, you tracked inputs, the actions that were within your control. Did I keep my promise to myself today? Did I follow my plan for the morning? Did I act in alignment with the future version of me? You built a simple habit tracker, not to obsess over streaks, but to remind yourself, you're someone who shows up. Because that's the game. Discipline isn't about the giant moves. It's about showing up when it's raining, when you're tired, when no one cares, when no one claps. And realizing, that's the part that makes you different. Still, some days you failed. You hit snooze, you ate the junk, you skipped the work. But you didn't spiral. Because now, your discipline came with grace. You didn't let one missed day become a missed week. You didn't confuse a mistake with your identity. Instead, you asked, what would the future me do after this misstep? And you did that. That's when it clicked. Discipline isn't rigidity. It's resilience. It's not about punishing yourself into greatness. It's about showing up with purpose and getting back up without shame. People started asking you, how do you stay so focused? You smiled. Because they didn't see the systems you'd built behind the scenes. The hours you carved out. The triggers you removed. The goals you redefined. They saw consistency. But you knew the truth. Discipline isn't a gift. It's a system. And anyone can build it. You used to wait for a better season. Now you created better days. You used to admire the self-disciplined. Now you became one. Not because of superhuman effort, but because of intentional architecture. And slowly, life began to reflect that. Not in fireworks, but in flow. You trusted yourself more. You started finishing what you started. You became someone people could count on, because you could count on yourself. The dopamine wasn't in the outcomes anymore. It was in the daily wins, the small completions, the quiet victories, the journal you opened, the task you finished, the comfort you delayed. Each one was a whisper. You're not just chasing your future. You're earning it. And that's what most people miss. They think shaping your future is about big leaps. But it's not. It's built in the micro decisions, stacked, repeated, refined. You didn't just write your goals anymore. You lived them. And it all started when you stopped waiting to feel ready. And started behaving like the future depended on today. Because it did. And now, so do you. Failure used to feel like a full stop, a red light, a "you're not good enough" verdict from the universe. But now, you started to see it for what it really was, a signal, not a sentence. When you began shaping your future, you thought success would mean fewer mistakes, fewer stumbles. But ironically, the more seriously you took your growth, the more failure increased. Not because you were doing worse, but because you were playing bigger. Bigger action equals bigger feedback equals bigger lessons. And at first, that was terrifying. You still remember one of your first major setbacks in this new journey. You launched something, maybe a business idea, a project, a bold pitch, something that required courage. You expected results. You hoped for momentum. But what you got? Silence. Rejection. Maybe even embarrassment. It stung more than it should have. Not because of the outcome, but because of what it triggered in you. Old beliefs. Childhood echoes. The inner voice whispering, "See, I told you." You almost quit. Because in that moment you didn't just fail. You made it mean something about you. But something was different this time. This wasn't the old version of you. And so, instead of spiraling, you paused. And you asked a new question. What if failure isn't the opposite of success, but the cost of entry? That one shift changed everything. You started to view failure the way elite athletes and top performers do. Not as evidence of inadequacy, but as data. Failure became feedback, and feedback became a map. So you wrote down a new rule for yourself. When I fail, I extract value before I move on. You stopped using failure to punish yourself. You started using it to refine yourself. You built what you called the failure reframe method, a simple process that transformed pain into power. Step 1. Separate the event from your identity. You stopped saying, "I failed." You started saying, "That didn't work." Because events are neutral. You assign the meaning. And if you are your failure, you'll never risk again. But if you failed at something, you can learn from it. This was huge. You started to protect your identity from collapse by giving yourself language that respected the difference between who you are and what happened. Step 2. Extract the signal. You asked, what is this teaching me that success couldn't? Most people only reflect when they win. You became someone who reflects when they lose. And in that loss, you started to notice patterns. A trigger you hadn't addressed. A process you rushed. An expectation you failed to clarify. Failure stopped being a surprise. It became part of your feedback loop. You weren't just reacting anymore, you were refining. Step 3. Recommit with precision. This was critical. You didn't just get up and try again blindly. You asked, what do I need to do differently? What system failed? Not just what I failed. What can I build or fix so I never make this mistake twice? Because the most dangerous failure isn't the first one. It's the repeated one you didn't learn from. This new relationship with failure did something unexpected. It made you bolder. You started shipping more ideas, trying more experiments, having tougher conversations. And while most people were playing defense, trying to avoid looking stupid, you were building your tolerance for risk. You started treating failure like the gym. The more you trained it, the stronger you got. People around you began to notice. They said things like, you're not afraid to go for it. You bounce back so fast. You seem unshakable. What they didn't see was that your resilience wasn't personality. It was process. You had trained yourself to recover, mentally, emotionally, practically. You weren't betting your self-worth on perfection anymore. You were betting it on growth. And growth is messy. Always. You also started studying people you admired. And guess what? None of them succeeded in a straight line. Every one of them had stories of failure that would have wrecked most people. The difference? They didn't let their failures rewrite their worth. They let them rewrite their strategy. That's when you realized, success is a lagging indicator of your ability to learn faster than most people quit. And you? You were still here. You were still iterating. You were still moving. That made you rare. But let's be honest, there were still emotional hits. Nights where you replayed mistakes. Mornings where you questioned your path. But now you had a process. You didn't numb it, you named it, you didn't run from it. You ran it through your system, and every time you came back better. Failure didn't shrink you anymore. It sharpened you. And one day, it hit you. If I fear failure less than I fear stagnation, I'm unstoppable. You weren't fearless. You just had new priorities. Growth over ego. Progress over pride. And most importantly, learning over looking perfect. Because in the end, the people who shape the future aren't the ones who fail the least. They're the ones who use it the best. And now, you were one of them. Momentum is a strange thing. It's invisible while you build it, but undeniable once it arrives. In the beginning, you chased results, validation, breakthroughs, milestones. But somewhere along the line, you noticed something more powerful forming beneath the surface. It wasn't massive wins or explosive growth. It was momentum. That quiet force that shows up not after one giant effort, but after consistent motion, day after day, hour after hour, even when the results are microscopic. And now? It wasn't about being motivated anymore. It was about being in motion. Let's rewind. When you first started shaping your future, every little step felt disconnected, like isolated dots on a canvas. Write in the morning, eat healthier, say no to distractions. Make that uncomfortable call. At the time, they felt small, forgettable, insignificant. But looking back, those small moves were compounding. Each tiny, invisible action was stacking, like pennies in a jar. Until suddenly, there was weight behind your actions. There was rhythm, and momentum was born. Here's what most people miss. Success doesn't happen suddenly. It reveals itself gradually, then all at once. What feels like an overnight breakthrough is usually 100 tiny efforts finally syncing up. You started calling it the compound effect of identity. Because yes, your habits compounded. But more importantly, so did your belief. Every time you showed up, even when no one noticed, you proved to yourself, I'm the kind of person who keeps going. And those votes added up. That's the real momentum. Not external success, but internal certainty. And with that came an unshakable confidence. Not because you were always right, but because you were always moving.
Think of it like this. Every choice you make is a brushstroke. At first, the canvas looks like nothing. But as the strokes stack, day by day, a picture forms. Not because you planned every detail perfectly, but because you didn't stop painting. That's momentum. And momentum makes hard things easier. Not because the task gets smaller, but because you've gotten stronger.
Let's talk numbers for a second. There's a principle called the 1% rule. The idea that if you improve just 1% each day, you don't get 365% better over a year. You get over 37 times better. That's exponential growth. But here's the catch. You don't see it in the early days. The results are asymmetrical. In other words, day 1, no change. Week 1, still subtle. Month 1, barely noticeable. But month 6, momentum takes hold. Month 9, others start noticing. Year 1, you're not the same person anymore. That's the game you committed to. Not quick wins, but compounding identity. And what makes it work? 3 things. 1. Rituals over goals. You stopped obsessing over outcomes. Instead, you obsessed over routines, morning systems, planning rituals, review habits. These became your anchors, because you realized goals are destinations, but rituals are the vehicle. 2. Tracking inputs, not outcomes. You used to measure success by results. Now, you measure success by consistency. Did I follow through today? Did I make progress on what I control? Did I keep my word to myself? You stopped outsourcing your pride to external results, and that made you dangerous. Because now, you didn't need the win to stay in the game. The game itself became the win. 3. Stacking habits with identity. You layered your habits with who you believed you were becoming. Not just, I meditate every day, but, I'm the kind of person who protects their mind. Not just I work out, but, I'm someone who respects their body and energy. This habit identity loop is what made your actions stick. Because when your actions and your self-image align, momentum becomes automatic. And here's what was wild. The external results started to snowball without chasing them directly. Opportunities found you. People noticed. Your ideas landed harder. Not because you changed overnight, but because momentum made you undeniable. You weren't waiting for motivation anymore. You had velocity. And velocity is intoxicating. It draws in collaborators, resources, and synchronicities that don't come to the hesitant. The universe doesn't reward doubt. It rewards decisive motion. You also got better at managing the dips. Because yes, even with momentum, not every day was upward. There were flat lines, setbacks, plateaus. But the difference now? You didn't mistake a pause for a problem. You understood that momentum is like a flywheel. It takes effort to push at first, but once spinning, it carries itself. So you stayed with it. You didn't restart from scratch every time motivation dipped. You trusted the process. Because now, the game wasn't sprint and stop. It was sustain and stack. Eventually, you reached a point where discipline, identity, and action were so synchronized. That future version of yourself? You weren't chasing it anymore. You were it. And people started asking you, how did you do it? You smiled, because they were asking for a moment. But what really changed everything? The momentum. Momentum isn't hype. It's not hustle. It's alignment in motion. And the only way to get it? Start moving before you're ready. Keep going when it's boring. Trust the compounding, not the immediate. And eventually, you'll look up and realize, the life you used to fantasize about? You're living it. Because you earned it. One tiny choice at a time. Environments shape futures more than intentions ever will. You've heard people say, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. But the truth is deeper than that. You are the product of everything in your environment. People, places, conversations, inputs, sounds, routines, digital feeds, even smells. Once you had momentum, you realized something startling. It wasn't enough to change yourself. You had to change the ecosystem around you. Because if your environment doesn't support your vision, it will sabotage it silently. There was a moment. You woke up, full of energy, clear on your mission. But by noon, you were drained, distracted, disconnected from your purpose. And it kept happening, until you paused and asked the question that changed your trajectory. What am I allowing into my world that's stealing my future? You started to see how your surroundings, digital and physical, were leaking your potential. It wasn't laziness, it was misalignment. And from that point on, you got ruthless. First, you audited your digital diet. What you scrolled became what you believed. And what you believed became what you built. So you asked, who am I following? What kind of energy do they bring? Does this feed my vision or feed my fear? You unfollowed accounts that glorified drama and distraction. You muted voices that made you feel small, bitter, or reactive. You curated your feed like your future depended on it. Because it did. Instead of doom scrolling, you dream scrolled. Your digital environment became a tool, not a trap. Second, you designed your physical space to signal your future self. You looked at your room, your desk, your kitchen, your car, and you asked, does this space invite the best version of me, or anchor the old one? You removed clutter, rearranged furniture, set up visual cues. You kept books you wanted to absorb in your line of sight. You placed water on your desk to remind yourself to hydrate. You posted your core values in your workspace like a North Star. Your space went from neutral to intentional, from chaotic to curated. It started speaking back to you, silently reinforcing who you were becoming. Third, you elevated your circle. This was the hardest part. Some people had to go. Not because they were evil, but because they were heavy. They couldn't see your vision. They mocked ambition, minimized dreams, distracted you with old habits. It hurt to let some of them drift, but you made peace with this. Not everyone who started with me is meant to finish with me. You stopped trying to drag people into the future. You started attracting the right ones by becoming the type of person they wanted to be around. And slowly, your circle shifted. Now conversations weren't about complaints, they were about challenges. Not gossip, growth. Not what are you watching, but what are you building? Your energy began to mirror the room, and the room mirrored you. Fourth, you created boundaries that guarded your vision. You set time blocks. You turned your phone off during deep work. You created a start and stop ritual to separate work from rest. You said no to things that diluted your energy, not because you didn't care, but because you cared more about your mission. And for the first time, your days started to feel on purpose. Then came a deeper realization. Your environment isn't just a background. It's a behavior shaper. Want to eat healthier? Set your kitchen up to make junk food invisible and good food easy. Want to read more? Put books where your phone used to be. Want to meditate? Create a small space with no distractions, even if it's just a corner with a cushion and a candle. Small environmental shifts led to massive internal change, and that momentum, it got stronger. Because now it wasn't just you trying to grow, your world was helping. You even built trigger points into your environment. Little reminders to check in with yourself. A sticky note that asked, what would future me do right now? A lock screen quote. You're not tired, you're untrained. Alarms labeled not just wake up, but wake up with purpose. Your surroundings became interactive, alive, like they were coaching you back to your higher self. And perhaps the most profound shift, you started to feel safe in your future. Because everything around you was reflecting it. No more fighting against the tide of chaos. No more surviving distractions. You had designed an environment that pulled you into alignment. You weren't forcing discipline anymore. You were flowing in a system that made discipline easier. This made everything more sustainable. Your energy increased. Your focus deepened. Your rest became restorative. Your creativity exploded. Not because of some magical inspiration, but because your conditions supported it. That's the secret high performers understand. Discipline isn't willpower. It's design. And now, you weren't just building your future inside yourself. You were living in it. Literally. Every room, app, schedule, and relationship was now a piece of your blueprint. And every day you woke up inside it, it got stronger, more real, more you. So if someone asks, where do I start shaping my future? You might say, start with your space. It's already shaping you. Change doesn't last unless identity shifts. This was the turning point. You had habits, systems, even a future-ready environment. But something deeper had to click for everything to lock in. You had to stop chasing results as someone trying to change, and start living as someone who already was that person. This wasn't about pretending. It was about embodying. There's a subtle but life-changing difference between these two statements. I'm trying to be more disciplined. I'm a disciplined person. One is effort. The other is identity. And identity drives behavior. You realized, every time you act, you're casting a vote for the kind of person you believe yourself to be. So you asked the question that restructured your life. What kind of person would have the future I want? And then you started living as them. Before it was true. Before it was perfect. Before anyone else believed it. You went first. You stopped saying, I hope I become more confident. You began with, I am the kind of person who speaks with power, even when I'm scared. You stopped saying, I'm working on being consistent. You shifted it to, I don't break promises to myself, period. This change in language created a change in alignment, because your brain is always trying to stay congruent with your identity. So if you say you're someone with grit, your subconscious starts hunting for ways to prove it true, and soon enough, it is true. This identity shift didn't mean you were never afraid, never doubting, never off track. It just meant you were building your life from the inside out. Before, your identity came from what happened to you. Now, it came from what you decided to believe. On purpose. You became your own sculptor, and your thoughts became the chisel. But how do you actually shift identity? Here's what worked. 1. Name the future identity clearly, not just better. That's vague. You got specific. You journaled. Who is my future self? What does a day in their life look like? What do they tolerate, avoid, create, believe? You wrote it out like a character in a movie. And then you asked, what would they do today in my shoes? And you did that, not when you felt like it, but because that's who you were becoming. 2. Create identity-based habits. You stopped setting goals like run 5 miles a week. Instead, you set goals like be the kind of person who never misses a run. You didn't try to write more. You decided, I'm a writer. Writers write, so I write. You didn't aim to eat healthy. You chose, I'm someone who treats my body like an elite performer does. Now, every action wasn't just progress, it was proof. Proof of who you were. 3. Celebrate tiny wins as identity reinforcement. After a tough workout, you didn't just say, that was hard. You said, that's who I am now. After waking up early, even when tired, you whispered, disciplined people show up anyway. That's me. You used evidence to rewrite your internal narrative. Because your story wasn't just told, it was trained. 4. Challenge the old story. Often. There were moments the old identity tried to creep back in. I've always struggled with this. I'm just not naturally focused. I mess up too much to be that person. But now you knew better. You didn't argue with the story. You replaced it, out loud. You caught yourself mid-thought and said, that's my past speaking, not my truth. I choose who I am. And over time, those corrections rewired your belief system. Then came the moment. It was subtle, no fireworks. But you noticed it. You woke up and acted in alignment without effort. The decision fatigue, gone. The constant second-guessing, quieter. You were no longer pretending to be someone new. You were just being. It had clicked. Identity had caught up with intention. And that's when everything accelerated. Because identity is the autopilot of your future. Once it's set, you don't need willpower. You just live it. But here's what you don't hear enough. You don't have to earn a new identity. You just have to choose it consistently. That's the secret. Not years of waiting, but moments of commitment, stacked daily. Eventually, the old you becomes a memory. Not because you killed them off, but because you outgrew them. With every choice, you rose. Until one day, you looked in the mirror and didn't see potential. You saw power. You saw the person you once only imagined. And it felt natural, because it was no longer a stretch. It was simply you. If someone asks now, how do I become the kind of person who shapes their future? You'll smile and say, you start by deciding who you already are. And then you live like it's true, because once identity shifts, everything else aligns. Resilience isn't a trait you're born with, it's a muscle you build over time. You learned this the hard way. Because shaping your future wasn't a smooth journey, it was messy, full of setbacks, times when you felt like giving up, when the old habits whispered, maybe this isn't for you, when the progress stalled, when the world seemed determined to knock you off course. The difference? You didn't just endure those moments. You used them. You came to see that resilience wasn't about avoiding failure. It was about how you responded to failure. Every obstacle became a test of your commitment, not a sign to quit. Remember that day when everything seemed to collapse? The project failed. You felt unseen, your energy drained. You wanted to disappear, but you took a breath and asked, "What can I learn from this? How can this make me stronger?" That moment marked a shift. You stopped fearing failure. You started embracing it as part of growth. Because failure is feedback, not a verdict. You developed 3 key habits to build resilience. 1. Reframe setbacks as stepping stones. Instead of beating yourself up, you asked, "What lesson hides in this? What can I do differently? How does this align with my long-term vision?" This shifted your perspective. Failures became data points, not disasters. 2. Practice emotional agility. You allowed yourself to feel disappointment, frustration, and fear. But you didn't let those emotions rule you. You named them. You acknowledged them. Then you chose your next step. This awareness gave you power. Because you realized, emotions are signals, not stop signs. 3. Build a support system. You found mentors, peers, and communities who believed in resilience. People who shared stories of struggle and comeback. You leaned on them during dark times. You gave back when others faltered. This network was a lifeline. Not just motivation, but accountability and hope. And over time, your resilience muscle grew. You started bouncing back faster. You handled stress better. You kept faith in the process, even when the outcome was invisible. Because you knew, the only true failure is quitting. Every other failure was just part of the path. That mindset made you unstoppable. You began to seek discomfort as a sign of growth. You celebrated scars as proof of survival. You learned that shaping your future isn't about avoiding the storm. It's about learning to dance in the rain. And with that came grit. The kind of grit that moves mountains quietly, persistently. Now when challenges arise, you don't panic. You lean in. You ask, "How can this moment shape me? What is it here to teach?" And because you do this consistently, your future becomes less about luck or talent, and more about your unbreakable commitment. That's resilience, and it's the backbone of success. Hey everyone, today we're diving into something bigger than just your personal success. We're talking about legacy, the impact you leave behind, the ripple that extends far beyond your own life. Because shaping your future isn't just about you, it's about the world you want to help create. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you really like what I do here. As you progressed on your journey, something profound became clear. Your future isn't isolated. It's connected, woven into the lives of others, the communities you touch, and even generations to come. Legacy is the ultimate shape of your future. It's the lasting mark of your vision, values, and the actions you take today. You started thinking beyond immediate wins or personal milestones. You asked yourself, what kind of impact do I want to have? What story do I want told about me when I'm gone? Legacy isn't just about money or fame. It's about influence, the ability to inspire, to lift others, to shift perspectives, and to build systems that outlive you. Building legacy meant embracing responsibility. Not because it's a burden, but because it's an opportunity. You began mentoring others, sharing what you learned, paying forward your hard-earned wisdom. You understood that helping others shape their futures enriches your own journey. Because legacy is multiplicative. Your success echoes when you elevate others. You also realize that legacy requires consistency over time. It's not a one-time event or grand gesture. It's 1,000 small choices made every day. Showing kindness when it's easier to be indifferent. Standing up for what's right even when it's unpopular. Staying true to your values when shortcuts beckon. Creating opportunities where none existed. These choices build trust and respect. They build a foundation that lasts. You embrace the idea that shaping your future means shaping the future of those around you. It's about creating an ecosystem of growth. And as you grew, you started seeing your influence ripple outward. Friends and family inspired to pursue their dreams. Communities empowered by your example. Ideas spreading that challenge old limitations. Your story became part of a larger narrative of progress. But legacy isn't just about others. It's about self-respect. It's knowing that you lived with purpose, that you fought for your vision even when it was hard, that you left the world better than you found it. As you close this chapter, remember, your future is a canvas. painted not just with your dreams, but with the impact you dare to make. So, what legacy will you choose to create? What story will your future self be proud to tell? Because in the end, shaping your future means shaping more than just your life. It means shaping the world. Thanks for being part of this journey. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this with someone ready to start shaping their future today. Your legacy starts now.